WWE says, let's look at the books, because Shane wanted to buy it. So Shane wanted to buy ECW and run it on its own.
If you guys didn't know, Shane McMahon once upon a time almost bought WCW. Paul Heyman was recently on Chris Van Vliet's podcast, and he discussed the fact that Shane McMahon almost bought ECW from under him before ECW would eventually go bankruptcy. Well, file for bankruptcy. So let's go to Paul Heyman to discuss this. Fair use.
Pirating their music on the air. Like most record labels, I got a cease and desist. I ignored the cease and desist. Then I got a dunning letter saying, stop this immediately. And by the way, we're preparing to sue you. I went in to meet with them without any lawyers on my side, because if I could afford lawyers, I could afford a settlement. Told them, hey, here's the past year of finances for ECW. We're about to go bankrupt. You sue me, I go into an involuntary bankruptcy. Nothing I can do to help you or help myself. However, I do have this platform, and a lot of people like our show. So if you let me use the music and I give you commercial time on our show, because I own some of the commercial time throughout the syndication of ECW, I can promote your music and you can let me use it and we can both win. And I did that with...
You gotta love Heyman being the ultimate businessman for this, because he didn't care until he was back against the wall. Let's continue.
A lot of record labels, to the point where in 2000, the biggest behind-the-scenes name in music, Jimmy Iovine, who was the co-chairman of Universal Music Group at the time with Doug Morris, which was Geffen, A&M, and Interscope, all under Universal Music, became the final investor in ECW before we went out of business. In terms of WWE, I had the deal with Tommy Boy Records for $1,000 a week for them to supply us with Whoop, There It Is for Too Cold Scorpio. Every time he came out to the ring, you'd see that MTV-style lower third, Whoop, There It Is by this group, Tommy Boy Records. And then the very next commercial break, in first position, we would either thank Tommy Boy Records while playing Tommy Boy music, or we would have a commercial for the newest release by Tommy Boy Music. $1,000 a week. Vince wanted Doug Furnace, Phil LaFon, Terry Gordy to be the executioner, and he wanted Too Cold Scorpio to come to WWE as Flash Funk. I had no problem with any of those talents going to WWE. My problem was in losing Too Cold Scorpio, I could lose the $1,000 a week from Tommy Boy Records. Vince said, I'll make that $1,000 up to you. Deal. He didn't, his words, don't want to be like WCW, just poach your talent and give you nothing back for it. Want to support the cause. Great, need $1,000 a week. Okay, great. And if Tommy Boy keeps paying you, you keep that extra grand. Great, the first check came, was in my name. I sent it back. Please make it out to the parent company of ECW, HHG. We got $1,000 a week from November 1996 till we filed for bankruptcy in March 2001. That was the $1,000 a week. In 2000, we got a $500,000 loan in July. The reason behind that was we had gone on TNN in September 1999. Unbeknownst to us, TNN, which was the Nashville network, was becoming the national network. But what we didn't know was that they had already been sold to Viacom, which was the parent company of CBS. Viacom had already cut a deal behind the scenes with WWE for WWE to leave USA Network, which was then owned by Barry Diller, and go to TNN the next September, which became a big federal court case in Delaware. So we were the guinea pig for TNN to be on the air and see how professional wrestling translates on their network, which was undergoing a massive overhaul. I knew 3 weeks into that agreement, this is going to kill us, because all of our commercials, which was supposed to be spread out throughout the week, would air on our own show. So I'm watching the show on Friday nights, and there's our commercials instead of being on Monday nights, Tuesday nights, Wednesday nights, Thursday nights, Saturday nights, Sunday nights. And I called the president of TNN, and I said, why are our commercials airing on our own show? And he said, it's the target demographic. In other words, fuck you, you're out of business. And we're using you and you don't know why yet. So at some point, it became...
So if you guys don't know, WWE in 2000, they said, well, as Heyman said, that deal with WWE and TNN, that was for $12.6 million. And that was unheard of back in around that time. So let's continue.
Known that WWE was trying to move to TNN. And any analysis of the situation was TNN was the albatross around our neck that was going to sink us. And TNN was a gold mine for WWE because the licensing money for wrestling on television wasn't that great back then. And the tens and tens of millions of dollars that TNN was willing to give WWE was unheard of at the time. It was
12.6.
a huge deal. And at some point in putting us out of business, the bankruptcy trustee was going to end up suing TNN and WWE for having this deal while we were on the air with TNN. Whether it's tortious interference or whatever the claims would have been, it would have been another federal lawsuit against a publicly traded company in WWE. Back in 2000, there was an executive at In Demand whose name I will call out publicly, named Dan York. And Dan York saw the fact that we were fighting for our life in terms of our network distribution on TNN. Knowing that if we lose network distribution, the odds of us staying alive were now slimming down. Our pay-per-view money slowed down as well. So instead of getting all this money 60 days, 90 days after the pay-per-view, we got a little bit 60 days and 90 days after the pay-per-view. And we even got a little less, 120 days and 180 days. We're supposed to be completely paid out by 180 days. We weren't paid out 50% by 180 days. So we weren't getting our money out of In Demand because they figured they could deal with the bankruptcy trustee instead of having to pay us now. They did the same thing to Bob Arum. Bob Arum had the resources to sue and wait a few years to get that settled. We didn't have the time. The clock was ticking on us. We booked a show at the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles, Heatwave 2000, 6,000, however many tickets. We sold out within the first hour, and I didn't have enough money to put on the show. Our pay-per-views were successful enough that we did 3 the first year, 1997, 4 in 1998, 6 in 1999, and they ordered 7 in 2000. It's $250,000 just for the satellite truck and the satellite feed. So the production on a pay-per-view show back then was at least $250,000 and all in close to $500,000.
That's crazy. That's really crazy to hear.
And we didn't have it. We couldn't clear payroll at the time. How am I going to put on that show? Meanwhile, I've sold 6,000 tickets in Los Angeles, but I can't get that money till after the show because Ticketmaster holds it on till the show is over. Holds on to it till the show is over. I had a meeting with Vince. I looked at him straight in the face and I said, I can't put on this show. If I can't put on the show, I'm going to be in breach of my contract with In Demand. They're going to pull my pay-per-views, which means then we're dead in the water. I'll end up in bankruptcy and you'll be dealing with a trustee. Or you can loan me the money.
And you had a good relationship with Vince at the time.
Excellent. I had a great relationship with Vince until I went to work for him. Then he had me, and that's when we started butting heads. And I can't complain ultimately with my run with Vince McMahon. But at first, wow, was it a difference in working for him instead of being on the outside and working with him. Went to Vince, explained it to him. He looked, he said, well, you need $500,000. Yes. And to his credit, for his shareholders, he said, well, I'll need a UCC1, which means he stands in front of all the other creditors, which means if we were to go into bankruptcy, the trustee would not have the ability to make the claim against Vince McMahon, WWE, TNN, et cetera, because I've signed that away with the loan. So he settles a case before it's ever filed for $500,000. That $500,000 bought us another 7 months of being alive because we weren't going to survive that July without that $500,000. The secured priority loan for $500,000. At the very end, Christmas week 2000, when everything was dire, we had lost TNN. The money is now trickling in from In Demand. Now In Demand wants 8 pay-per-views in 2001. We don't even have national television.
That's all the fact that you have, they're in demand, but they're asking for more pay-per-views, but you have no TV to even air your weekly television. Interesting.
WWE says, let's look at the books, because Shane wanted to buy it. So Shane wanted.
So this is the first, to my knowledge, this is the first time this has actually come out that Shane wanted to buy ECW. It might not have a bunch of legs to it, but this is actually interesting. Actually interesting to hear, and you'll hear Paul continue to talk about it for a second.
To buy ECW and run it on its own. Vince said, it's easier just to let it go into bankruptcy, and we get Heyman. Shane still pushed and pushed and pushed. So for the accountants to take a look at all the books and to buy us the time not to be pulled into an involuntary bankruptcy by somebody, we will own $83,500 to make payroll that week so that we can survive the week for WWE to look at the books. And those were the 3 payments, the $1,000 per week, every week through bankruptcy, the $500,000 loan in July 2000, the $83,000, I think it was that, $83,000 or $88,500 in December 2000. There was no other payments made by WWE. There was no other secret funding. And this is all a matter of public record because WWE was a publicly traded company by this time. And it's all there. And it's all in the bankruptcy papers. But never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Why didn't Shane end up buying ECW?
Vince found it more valuable to have me in the, as Vince would say, I'd rather have Paul Heyman in the castle pissing out than out of the castle pissing in.
So at that point in time, it'll be very interesting to think about what ECW would look like ran by Shane McMahon. And well, I guess Paul, who knows? Paul might still be in charge of it, but with some influence from Shane, it's interesting to see what ECW ran by Shane McMahon as the owner would actually look like. And what Paul's saying is right. To Vince, ECW was nothing to him, but to have Paul Heyman as an ally was way more valuable than actually having ECW as another brand.
It's the same move that Apple made in buying Beats. Apple didn't need Beats. Apple wanted Jimmy Iovine. Vince McMahon was tired of me being out on my own, being an independent, doing my own thing, decided we need Heyman and wanted Heyman involved. And to get Heyman, you had to at least secure the assets of ECW or promise the bankruptcy court to secure the assets of ECW so that there's a curator for our library. And along with that comes Paul Heyman.
I grew up as a huge ECW fan. I was so used to seeing you with a ponytail. What's the story behind?
All right, so that was Paul Heyman discussing how WWE was not secretly lending him any money, and how Shane McMahon almost wanted to buy the company, but would not eventually buy the company, and they would close their doors, and Paul Heyman would debut as a commentator on WWE, and would be proved to be more valuable to Vince McMahon. Let me know what you got. More viable. He will be more of a help to Vince McMahon as being a part of the company than being not a part of the company. So let me know what you guys think in the comments about Shane McMahon almost